Can you guess what the hack is for getting the skins off of tomatoes? I'll let you take a guess. Hey, it's Rachel here from Bush Edge Homesteading Australia, and today I'm going to show you a little bit of a hack that I do over the summer when I'm getting little bits and pieces of tomatoes coming in but not enough to preserve in one hit. Basically what I do is I pop them in the freezer and then I can slip the skins off in a really easy way that I'm going to show you guys. Now, I need to get them out of the freezer because you can probably see here, my freezer is absolutely chockers and we're getting to the stage of the year where we're going to be processing some lambs as well. So I need to get some space back in here, and a lot of the space is currently taken up with the tomatoes. So I'll put you down for a second so that I can do a bit of digging and get the containers of tomatoes out from the bottom of this freezer. Yeah, always the way, right down the bottom. See if I can get this one out. So this was one of the bags that I filled, and down there we have a big container as well. So let's grab those out. That definitely freed up a fair bit of space in here. Here's all the tomatoes that I'd harvested over the season that I'd put away. Obviously we ate a lot fresh as well. But it's not as large a crop as we normally have. We had a really cold and wet season up here in the Dandenong Ranges. In fact, with the La Nina, it was like that right up the eastern seaboard. So I think I'm not the only one that had a bit of a poor tomato harvest this year. And that's why I didn't really get to do any big batches of canning with our tomatoes all at once. So I was just growing them one by one as I was having excess beyond our fresh eating, and I was popping those in the freezer. Now what that means is that these are going to be really easy now to skin. And for a lot of canning recipes, you do want to slip the skins off because it can make the texture a little bit weird. Now it's not 100% necessary. I suppose there's a little bit of conflicting information about that, but in some canning guides it does talk about making sure you do take your skins off your tomatoes because the skins can add, I guess, a higher level of risk of botulism. But they are a vine. You're not growing in the dirt. So for me personally, I'm pretty comfortable normally with leaving skins on, except for where it's going to be a bit of a textural issue. So if I'm doing whole tomatoes or I'm doing diced tomatoes where you're going to get big pieces of skin, I find when you cook that into sauces and things like that, it can leave these kind of big bits of skin in your mouth that aren't quite that nice for your texture. Taste doesn't really make a difference. Texture, yes it does. You can use a few other things to get your skins off. This one here is just a bit of a hack. There's a couple of other things like, you know, kind of boiling and then dipping into some cold water after you've had the tomatoes in boiling water to slip the skins off. There's also a bit of equipment that I'll show you. One sec. That's this one here that I've got in my study. Spin you around a bit. It's a food strainer. This one's one of the Roma ones, and this is really good when you're making things like ketchups where you want to get all the skins off, and also it removes the seeds as well, because some people don't like seeds in their tomatoes. They say it adds a bit of bitterness. Again, personal preference kind of comes in. I'm not too fussed about it. But if you want a really nice smooth tomato ketchup or tomato sauce, one of these is really handy. But that's not what I'm going to be doing today, so I don't really care about those seeds. And as I said, I'm going to show you the hack to get off the skins, and yeah, let's go have a look at that. Let's go back to tomato growing season when I harvested all of these so you can see how I went about freezing them. I've been out in the garden this morning and picked a few things because the weather's starting to turn and the bugs were starting to get into our tomatoes, but I don't have time to preserve up everything today. And I know tomatoes are going to take me a little bit of time because I'm going to want to can these up. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to put them away so that they don't go to waste until I can get to them. My tip for storing those tomatoes when you just can't quite get to preserving them is to pop them in the freezer. And to be honest, I've had a fair few lately where I've been picking and I just haven't had time to preserve, and also not quantities as well to preserve. So what I've been doing is storing them in this container here in the freezer. So I'll take that in the kitchen now. I'll open it up and show you what that looks like. All right, here is our frozen tomatoes, and as you can see, they are frozen solid, and there's quite a few in this little container here that I've been collecting over the season until I've got enough to preserve up. And it really does just make life a little bit quicker and easier as well. It means that I'm not having to preserve in lots of batches. I can just keep popping these all in the freezer until I've got enough for one big canning run. And that's where these ones here are going to go into today. I've washed these up already, and that is kind of important that you do want to give them a good wash before you put them in the container. And that's because of the way these guys are going to defrost. Basically what happens is when they start to defrost, they lose their shape and a lot of water comes out of them. So that water is actually a really nice tomato juice, and you can use that in cooking. But if you haven't washed up your tomatoes, that's going to have a lot of grit and dirt in it. And that's why you want to make sure these are all nice and clean. Also because of that, you want to also make sure your little green tops are off. So I've done that already in the garden with a lot of these. I think there's a couple in the bottom here. There we go, like this one here. And all I want to do is just take the top off of those. I'll toss that into my biogas, and that will go in here with the rest of them. Now, aside from it being nice and quick and easy in terms of storing them until you've got enough to do a big preserving run, there is another good reason you might want to do this, and that's because it makes it easier when you actually do the preserving itself, because the skins of these slip off really easily once they have been frozen and defrosted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop filming today, and I'm going to take you to a time in the future where I do actually have a little bit more time on my hands, and I'm going to show you what I do with the preserving of these and what it looks like once they start to defrost. These went in the freezer, now back to today. So now that we've got these frozen tomatoes, how do you get the skin off that? The first step for removing those tomato skins is to wait. I need to have a bit of patience because I'm not going to be able to do my canning today. I need to actually make sure that I take them out of the freezer in advance. So I've frozen them, they're nice and solid, but I need these to defrost. And once they're defrosted, that's when we can start slipping the skins. So if you want to do this, just keep in mind that you need a little bit of prior planning. Make sure you take them out of the freezer the day before. So I'll catch you tomorrow. Good morning. Our tomatoes have been defrosting overnight. And if we have a bit of a look in here now and give them a bit of a poke, you can see they're now really, really soft. And a lot of them have kind of released the juice as well. In fact, if we have a bit of a look down in the container, you can see there's quite a bit of juice that's come out of these. In fact, the one in the plastic bag behind, if we have a look at this one, you can see I ended up popping that in a tray, and there's quite a bit of the juice that's defrosted in here. Now, I'm probably not actually going to keep that juice there because this bag's been sitting in the freezer. It's been touching a lot of things that are a bit dirty. So that there is not necessarily going to be the cleanest and nicest juice, which is probably why it's better to use one of the containers like this if you want to retain it. Okay, so what we're going to do now is start slipping the skins off of these. So what I'm going to do is put the camera on a stand so I can use both hands and show you how to do that. You can see I've got a pot out here already, and that's because I'm going to need to heat the tomatoes up for the recipe that I'm going to do later on today. It's a hot pack recipe, so I'm just going to peel these directly into the pot. The other thing I've got here is a strainer and also a bowl. And the reason I've got that is because as I skin these tomatoes, I actually want to retain the skins, and that's so that I can dehydrate the skins. Dehydrated tomato skins are absolutely fantastic. What you do is you dry them out, you blitz them up into a powder, and then you can rehydrate that, and it's kind of like a tomato paste when you do that. So I want to make sure I retain all of the skins, but I want to remove as much moisture as possible before I put it in the dehydrator, and that's where this strainer here comes in. Okay, so let's start peeling some of these tomatoes. Let's have a bit of a closer look at peeling one of these tomatoes. So essentially all I want to do is break the skin. Some of them you'll find the skin will already be broken, and you just peel that off. You can see it comes off super easy. That goes into the strainer, and then I'm left with that tomato flesh, and that goes in my pot. Even though these have been out overnight, some of these are still a bit firm, a bit of ice on some of these too, but they will still peel the same. So you can see I can peel the skin off that nice and easily. Skin again goes in the strainer so that I can dehydrate that, and then I'll just peel the rest of that skin off. Now I've got a heap of these to do today, so what I'm going to do is just pop the camera to the side for a second, and I'm going to keep peeling all these. I'm now nearly through the first tub, and that's probably taken me about, I don't know, 15 minutes or so. I've got a whole bunch of skins and I've got a whole bunch of the flesh as well. But these ones still in the container are still really hard. Even though I left these out all night, they are still frozen solid. The ones that had started defrosting, I could peel those as you could see before, but these ones here, they are solid. So what I'm going to do is actually pour the liquid from these tomatoes into the container, oh sorry, into the pot, I should say, of our peeled tomatoes. And the reason for that is the canning that I'm going to do today, I'm just going to bottle up the whole lot in the jars together, the sauce and also the bits of tomato. You acidify the same, so it doesn't really matter putting that together. But if I was doing a different recipe where I wanted a richer tomato, I wouldn't put the juice in there. I'd keep the tomato juice separate and use that for stews. Okay, now I'm going to start our second bag, this one here. That's all our tomatoes peeled, and that took probably about another 10 minutes or so to do that, which included enough time for those last tomatoes that were in this container to defrost. Now what I want to do is just kind of get the rest of the moisture out of these ones here, and that's just so that the skins are as dry as possible for when I do my dehydrating. So I'll just give those a bit of a squish down, and also the last of the juice kind of poured out into the bowl. I'll pop that into the pot too, and all of that tomato will be canned up, and I'm going to do that in a separate video. I'm actually about to do a whole bunch of videoing for a basics of canning series, kind of similar to the fermented soda series that I did. So what I'm going to do today is actually can this up using my pressure canner, and I'm going to capture all of that for one of those videos. That's probably still another month or so off, but do look out for that when that series comes out. Yeah, so let me pop this into the dehydrator, and I'll give you a bit of a sneak peek of what that ends up looking like as well. And the other thing I should probably point out is you probably noticed I was doing this in my sink the whole time. And now you can probably tell why I was doing it in the sink. This is a bit of a messy activity. Sometimes when you've got the tomatoes and you grab the ones that haven't actually cracked, they kind of pop and juice goes everywhere. So that's why I like to do this in the sink. That's also why I'm wearing my red shirt today, so I don't stain anything. Today I'm going to use my Easy Dry dehydrator. If you've got any type of dehydrator, it will work for dehydrating your tomato skins. If you do have one with one of these mesh kind of pieces to go in your trays, that's quite handy, because some of these little pieces of tomato can get quite fine and fall through the normal trays. Not 100% necessary, but I quite like that. And although I don't have one for every single one of these trays, what I'll do is I'll pop that on the bottom so that if anything does fall through the top ones, at least it'll get caught on the bottom one with this. So with the tomato skins, all I want to do is pop those in the dehydrator on the tray and kind of spread them out as much as possible just to get the airflow, and that'll mean that they'll dry out a little bit quicker. One of the great things about the tomato skins is that they dehydrate really quickly. Probably only took about 6 hours for these to be ready. So let's have a bit of a closer look at them. You can see here, they're really nice and crispy now. And that means I can pop them in the blender and blend them up into a powder. 1.5 of those trays just went into the blender. Looks nice and full. But as you'll see in a second, that'll blend down to very, very little. probably see here that some of the tomato is stuck on the trays. This is where those sheets that I showed you earlier are a bit better. So this is one of the flexible ones. And what I can do with this one is actually bend it, and you can see that that lifts off all of that tomato a lot more cleanly. And here's our last lot to blend. There's our tomato powder. Let's see if we can get it to focus. You can see it's got quite a nice fine texture using the blender like this, and that's what you want, so that when you rehydrate it, it does kind of rehydrate like a tomato paste. And I'm just going to pop that in a clean, dry jar. You want it to be nice and dry, of course, because you've just done all that work to get rid of all that moisture. And if it does get moisture back into it, it's going to go really super solid and kind of turn all hard like a bit of a brick. And there we go. There is our dehydrated tomato powder from something that many people would consider to be waste. Thanks for joining me in the kitchen today as I peeled all of these tomatoes. Hopefully that was helpful to you if you've got some tomatoes to peel as well. It's definitely a much quicker and easier way I've found over the years to be able to get nice skin-free tomatoes. So thanks for joining, and catch you later.